Hi everyone, I'm Tom. My son's at one of the ATLP schools where all the teachers are striking at the moment. I'm fed up. I don't know how you guys are, but parents don't really seem to be aware of what we can all do. And so I thought, well, do you know what? I've got a good idea of some things that we can do to make an impact. So I put this quick video together to try and talk to you all collectively. So there's three things that we can do actually. First is reporting the issues to Ofsted and try and encourage them to come and inspect the school. I'll go into all this in a bit more detail later. Second is that we can sort of get together, and there's already a really good petition that's been put together by one of the parents, Catherine, and basically shout loudly at Richard Gill, the CEO, like master head teacher of all the school group. And then finally is just sort of getting our MPs to do something about it at state level with the Secretary of State. And hopefully we can do something to get these issues resolved and get our kids back in school. So just indulge me for a couple of minutes if you would. Teachers can strike all they want, but how is it going to be possible for a sandbox trust to pay out money that it just doesn't have? Okay, ATLP, it's a charity, and this is important to understand the difference between sort of what would have been a county council run school and this now with academies. The charities, and to all intents and purposes, they're private companies. But the only difference is that instead of shareholders, they've got trustees that are ensuring that funds are being recycled through in for charitable purposes, i.e. running the school. Government can't write blank checks really to support that, and that's part of the idea with academies as well, is that they're ring fenced and they're smaller, and so if one goes wrong like this here, they can be shut down and the school can be passed on to another academy that knows how to run schools better. Okay then, so what can we do as parents? I guess that's the key thing. On with that knowledge now, where can we aid due process to get things sorted out? First thing we do, Ofsted. Basically, our complaint, I guess, is going to be that the school isn't open to provide full-time education. Arguably, I would say a couple of days of strike action is probably permissible. This now we're into 5-6 weeks or whatever it may be is getting probably to that point where it's certainly not full-time education, but that's the job of Ofsted to decide whether or not they need to come in and inspect, and it is Ofsted's decision alone. I would argue one or two of us complaining probably isn't going to move the needle in Ofsted. If there's thousands of people complaining about the various different schools within ATLP, I think that should trigger something. How we do that, we need to do it through this official complaints form. I'll link to this form in the description of this YouTube video. Take you through to here and then just go through all the different questions and obviously report the school for violation of providing you with full-time education for your child. On the basis that they go in and inspect the school, questions no doubt going to be asked: is full-time education in line with the Education Act being delivered? Question mark. I personally think the answer will be, I don't think so. Obviously, it's up to the inspector to make that conclusion. In the event that it does, the school will be placed into special measures. What happens then? Well, special measures, think of it a bit like a court judgment. But special measures then means that it gives the legal authority for the Department for Education to come in and act on the situation. Whereas at the moment, the Department for Education have to take ATLP to court and go through all that process. So I think it would speed that process up for Department for Education to do something. It gives them the ability to move the school to a different trust. Unfortunately, it does need to be done to school by school level. It can't be done at a trust level yet. That legislation is going through at the moment. Separately to that, obviously we can all complain to Richard Gill, the ATLP CEO. Oh, hang on a minute, that's Richard Gill, the comedian. There we go, that's better. So Richard Gill obviously runs Arthur Terry Learning Partnership. He is effectively the head teacher of head teachers, sat at the top of the group of schools. There is this brilliant change.org petition put together, basically putting in a complaint to Richard Gill. He almost certainly will need to be reporting something like this to the trustees to deal with and to decide what action is. If it is that the trustees are not happy with the way that Richard Gill's operating the learning partnership out of these issues. So that's sort of a separate thing that we can do, and I urge you all to do that. Again, I'll put it in the description, the link through to this, and I guess sort of similarly, you could probably go on to change.org and search for ATLP. Obviously, these are the different MPs that have got ATLP schools within their constituency. They can't really do a lot directly, but the Department for Education should, where there's a breach, be able to go and sue the individual academy, to basically relinquish the academy of the operation, the access to the asset of the school, and then they can pass it on to another academy that can run it hopefully better. Obviously, these two guys here that are Secretary of State for Education and also the Minister of State for School Standards, these guys have the power to act. One thing I would say, actually, just be nice to them. Potentially say, look, I've watched this video, I agree. Send them the video link if you want. Okay, so I hope that was useful. Look, I'm not going to make any judgment of teachers here. I generally find teachers at my son's school really good and the head teacher's really awesome. With regards to the ATLP leadership and Richard Gill, a lot of bad press going around about their management. And, you know, whilst we can draw conclusions individually, the only real fact is that our kids aren't getting full-time education at the moment, and we pay in our taxes to get full-time education. So the service isn't being delivered. But I'm going to put my neck out here a bit with them. So my art teacher for senior school, Mr. Radbourne, he drilled into me that if you never make any mistakes, you never make anything. Now, I'm going to give the management and Richard Gill the benefit of the doubt. They're trying something entrepreneurial. They were trying something that could have been really good for the kids and really good for schooling. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out. Now, lots of academies around the country are trying different ideas, and some of them are working really well. And you know, the UK, as a result, has got world-leading education for our kids. This case, it hasn't happened, but there are existing laws that already exist to deal with this, so they can all be swiftly wrapped up without adversely affecting kids' schooling for years into the future. I question whether or not, you know, a loan that needs to be repaid, you know, over the coming decades is going to be great for ongoing education versus just moving the schools on to other academies and, you know, liquidating ATLP if that's what's required. Future years funding, i.e. our taxes, was then spent with educators and other academies that could better deploy, you know, the funds to teach our kids. And whilst we as parents can draw conclusions, you know, from an entrepreneurial idea gone wrong or incompetent leadership or, you know, something more sinister as some of the press have been suggesting, from our point of view as parents, it really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that we're continuing to get high quality full-time education that we're paying for in our taxes, and that just isn't happening at present. So I went to see my local MP, Dave Robertson, the other night at the clinic that he ran. There was quite a few, I think it was several hundred parents there, and he was blaming the frameworks, blaming the academy system, blaming the lack of laws that are there to deal with this. I find him a really good egg. I think he's a really nice guy and he seems very well-meaning, but I disagree with him on that. I think there are existing laws that are there, both in terms of education laws with the Education Act, with the agreements between the DfE and the individual academy, but also, you know, we're dealing with a limited charity here. There's company law that also kicks in. They need to just be used. Don't need sort of years and years of legislation change. Okay, we can learn from it and you can get on with that in the background. But in this instance, I'd like you to urge the Department for Education to get this resolved in a swift and timely manner. Yes, it probably is going to mean that teachers are going to have to be re-employed in other trusts and there's going to be disruption for their employment. Yes, it does probably mean that the senior management are going to have to go and find pastures new, and it probably does mean that the academy system is going to get a bit of a whack in the press. But bear in mind, you know, academies were set up because there was failings in these big behemoths of local authority education, and if this was a local authority that ended up in this mess, Christ, it would be a lot bigger problem than this is. You know, and the academy system is designed to have failure and for it to be small and for it to be quickly fixable. We just need to use the frameworks and the laws that are there to get on with it. So yes, us as parents, we have probably going to have to help our kids catch up for the next couple of months. But hey, you know, we don't live in a perfect world. You know, as long as it doesn't get drawn out any longer with a recovery plan that's going to affect us kids' schooling for years to come, our kids are going to be okay. We're just going to have to do a bit of extra work, unfortunately. A bit of final housekeeping. So I probably made a gaffe here and said something wrong. I can't amend the YouTube video after it's uploaded, but I will put some notes in the description where I've made mistakes, so I can edit them after I've published. So
go and have a look and just see if I've said something wrong. I'll put it in there. If there is something that another parent's got that's of use, post that into the comments and I will try and pin it so that it's accessible to everyone. But hey, let's all keep our chins up. Let's focus on where we can be effective and push the relevant powers to bring about swift change, so we can get back to having good quality full-time education for our kids, and we can get back to that Monday to Friday school run. Okay, lots of love to you all. All the best. Bye.